All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our YouTube live session today here in VantagePoint. Really excited to be with you, covering not so new topic, but one we haven't discussed, too frequently here in our recent sessions. But with October, now upon us, and Q4 rolling right in, whether you were ready for it or not, I figured it would be a great time to dive into cryptocurrencies and potential upcoming trends, as well as trends that maybe if you knew about some of that information ahead of time and really had a more proactive approach, you may be able to have caught some of those big moves that we've seen recently within the crypto area of the market. Now I say crypto area, so we're gonna highlight some of that a little later on in our session, but just to kick us off and get started, I would love to know for everyone who's in the session, if you can let me know if you are already a VantagePoint user or if this is your first time seeing VantagePoint. I am going to keep an eye on the comment section as we go through our session today, so feel free to type that in the chat. Let's just make sure everybody can hear me loud and clear, and of course that you know how to communicate with me during this session. So if you just make your way over to the chat and let me know whether or not this is your first time seeing VantagePoint, or if you're a seasoned pro. And if you're a seasoned pro, well then you'll pick up some tips and tricks along the way. And if not, great. We'll teach you something new about VantagePoint, and you're sure to take away a lot of new information today. So let's go ahead and just jump right on into it. Thank you so much, Lydia, for joining us, and Paul. Hey, David. Perfect. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you letting me know that. It's always good to make sure you guys can hear me loud and clear. Now, I've got our first chart on the screen. I figure, you know what, why not just kick it off with a bang, right? Let's start with Bitcoin itself. But before we dive into the charts and really get into our analysis today, I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm not a licensed advisor. So please understand the information I'm giving you is solely based on the technical analysis. In fact, the predictive technical analysis that you see here in VantagePoint. So, as we go through our training session today, understand that this is really meant for your education, for you to take away, the bits and pieces of the training that are going to work well within your trade strategy. So whether you're a VantagePoint user or not, I'm sure that the information provided here today will help you in your trading and hopefully give you more confidence. That's what we're doing these for, is to help the individual trader. So very good. Thanks, Edith. Much appreciated. Well, David, welcome. If this is your first time seeing VantagePoint, so glad to have you here as kind of an introduction. So tell me, we're of course going to dive into Bitcoin, and let's get started here because, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general were kind of a newer thing in recent years. I don't want to say now because, they've been out for quite some time, but really we've seen so many, so much evolution, let's put it that way, so much evolution within the cryptocurrency area of the market, adaptations of institutions and, further regulation that has really made this more available and more readily available to individual traders. So here's the great thing about cryptocurrencies and anything in VantagePoint is that we're really going to be looking at the charts the same way. So the first thing that we need to do really is kind of identify the trend, right? So let's identify how to find a trend in VantagePoint. Again, whether you're doing this on an individual asset or a cryptocurrency pair. So if we take a look at our current, I'm just actually going to use the current day because we've got a nice crossover here on 9/29. And so when I say crossover, I'm actually looking for this blue line. If you follow my crosshairs, I'm looking for that blue line to then cross above that black line. And a bullish crossover will be designated by the color green in the trend. So very easy, very simple, kind of this whole methodology of green is up, red is down. And so you will very quickly be able to see where a bullish trend starts. Now, of course, we're not ever relying on just one piece of information in VantagePoint. We actually want to layer on that confirmation. And it's this sense of layered confirmation coupled with the predictive indicators that really give VantagePoint traders a significant edge and a significant advantage in the markets to really create this proactive approach. So if you take our crossover that we see here on 929 and we jump on down to our next indication. And for those of you who are just joining us, hey guys, welcome. Let me know whether or not you've seen VantagePoint before, if this is your first time, but we're just doing a brief overview for those of you who have just joined. So you can see now where my crosshairs are down here. This is our neural index. This is a 2-day predictor of price. So it's actually looking out into the future at price 2 days ahead to see, okay, do we expect price movement on this market to continue up over the next 2 days? Ideal for that swing style of trading. Drop in the chat if you would like to know what price is going to do 2 days ahead. I better see a yes from everybody, right? So otherwise you might be in the wrong place. But if you take a look down at our neural index, we can see this is in fact confirming our bullish expectation of the trend. And so with that confirmation, we've now just checked another piece off of our list to say, okay, this is really starting to meet a potential setup here, all right? Now, if we take a look down further at our final area of our chart down here at the very lower portion, and I just dragged that screen up a little bit so you guys can see it. But if you see these 3 lines, I like to call them the Miami Vice lines because they're, cool Miami Vice colors, but they're actually very, very powerful predictive strength indicators. These are called the predictive differences. So if you hear me reference that throughout the session, I'm talking about these really powerful predictive indicators down here at the bottom. And these are going to measure the strength of a trend. Well, if you are expecting a bullish trend, you would want strength backing that, right? So you can consider these also like preliminary momentum indicators as well. And I say preliminary because remember, they're predictive. So if at this point we take a look at our predictive strength indicators back where our crossover was, we now have full confirmation here. So we can see that we had our 3 predictive differences going up, meaning strength coming into the trend, bullish strength, right? Up means bullish. And then the price action also continuing bullish, coupled with, of course, the crossover. And this predictive crossover and coupled with our other points of confirmation gives you plenty of confidence to say, all right, we know what this trend is now expected to do. What are you as a trader going to do to execute that move? And that's where your strategy is going to come into play. And quite simply, VantagePoint's very customizable for the individual trader. So maybe you like to enter into a trade a little earlier, right? Maybe you're a shorter term swing trader, and that's okay. We'll just switch on over to our shorter term point of confirmation, which is our short-term cross. Some of you are wondering how I did that so quickly. You can come up to the views and click that short-term crossover. This is just a 1-day expectation. So again, shorter time frame, going to be a bit more sensitive. That's okay. Each trader is going to really develop their own style, but be able to confirm that with the predictive indicators here in VantagePoint. So let me ask, for those of you, since we're on Bitcoin, and I'm gonna leave this chart up for a second, but since we're on Bitcoin, who is actually trading cryptocurrencies? Or are you just trying to learn more about the cryptocurrencies? Maybe you don't even know what cryptocurrencies are. So why don't you just drop in the chat for me if you are, new to cryptocurrencies, just put new, all right? If you're just kind of a beginner, just put beginner. And if you are just like an experienced crypto trader, drop that in as well with just, experienced. Let me know in the chat just so I know kind of who's out there and how to gear this session for everybody. All right. So again, going to keep an eye on that chat as it comes through. So feel free to type in your questions. And I'm actually going to be asking for some ticker symbols here in a moment. So, well, Michelle, perfect. You are in the right place, and we are going to dive into things from a beginner level all the way up to the experienced. So it doesn't matter your experience level. I'm sure you're going to take away some things from today's session. So perfect. Hello, hello. All right. Perfect, Michael. Great. So this is going to be just kind of, a really great session for you too. Again, whether you are experienced or you are, just starting out, maybe you don't even know what crypto is. That is okay. We've got something for everybody here in the session today. So let's keep it rolling here as we go along. So if you guys are wondering what in the world, how could we have seen this move on Bitcoin so much earlier? Well, take a look at the information and the data that's coming in for you behind the scenes in the VantagePoint software. So again, whether you have VantagePoint or not, I'm sure everybody can agree that the markets are absolutely interconnected. So I'm just going to pull up our market details here, and we are going to come to our intermarkets. So this intermarket screen that I just pulled up actually has Bitcoin as the focus. All right. So if you see Bitcoin right here in the center, all right, this is kind of our parent market, as I would call it. So with our focus market here as Bitcoin, those surrounding markets that you see, there's actually 31 of them there. These surrounding markets are actually the top driving factors that are influencing the movement of Bitcoin. All right. So of course, you can see other cryptocurrencies that are linked to Bitcoin. You can see other ETFs, and we're going to get to ETFs here in a little bit as well, because I'm sure a lot of you have questions on some of the crypto ETFs and some of the new crypto ETFs that have come out and just made things much more readily available. But also too, the Forex. So the currency pairs themselves, not just the cryptocurrencies, but things like the euro and the US dollar. How does the dollar weakness influence the strength of Bitcoin, right? That's also kind of part of our rally that we've seen here recently on Bitcoin in the last couple of days. So all of these influencing factors, but also the stocks, right? What assets, what individual stocks, what big players in the market are also impacting and influencing things like Bitcoin. Now, it doesn't matter how seasoned you are, how experienced you are, how many hours you spent studying the markets, or even decades. This is something that can be only done by artificial intelligence. Keep in mind, it's looking at millions and millions and millions worth of data points to pull these markets and understand the impact that they're actually having on Bitcoin. So everything that you see here is actually fit right into your predictive forecast on the screen. So keep that in mind when we're looking at the predictive forecast. So if we take a look at one of our market drivers, that's Bitcoin, right? And I'm just going to take a look. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. We will absolutely take a look. I'm just going to jot it down so I don't forget it. Sometimes it gets a little lost in the chat, and I don't want to do that to you. So I've definitely got that down. But one of the key pieces with any market, but also cryptocurrencies, is understanding the current trend. If you understand the current trend, then you can go find the opportunities. Right? So let's understand from a larger market perspective, those major market drivers, those major market movers, things like Bitcoin, how are they moving? And then what else is following them, right? So this Bitcoin assessment that we did with full bullish confirmation here, right? We've had bullish confirmation, in fact, on the shorter term since the 28th, all right? So on 9/28, we had that full confirmation, allowing you to enter into that potentially much earlier than anticipated, because we now knew that this was no longer going to be like a little blip on the map, right? It was actually going to turn into a potentially very lucrative breakout here. And I'm just going to grab my pen so I can draw on the screen as we go. But you can see even right here, we have a little blip on our trade map here from our chart details. Let me just pull my pen over here so it's not in the way. All right, there we go. So here, a blip versus a breakout, right? Understanding the difference between this can really make the difference between a huge loss, right, or a huge gain. So understanding that concept is going to be huge during our session, and we need those points of confirmation to confirm. But now knowing that Bitcoin is on a surge and is moving and is still expected to continue, this is confirmation of the continuation. I know that's a mouthful, but it is a potentially continued trend as long as our predictive indicators still expect that bullish forecast. And I'm going to point out one more indicator before we jump to our next market, and you can see this predictive trade range. This predictive trade range is going to tell you that we're expecting a higher low and a higher high. Why? Because, well, it's shaded green on both ends, and remember, green for bullish here, right? So if you take now what we've talked about with Bitcoin, right, and the fact that cryptocurrencies are moving significantly, then let's take a look at some other coins that have really started to move in sync as well, because you can always capitalize on additional trends. Maybe you don't want to trade Bitcoin, right? Maybe something at a lower price point is a little easier for you, or maybe like some of the altcoins or some of the meme coins, as they're also termed, as well. So we have things like Doge, so we can pull that up. And you know what, Michael, I'm gonna pull yours up right now, because that is also a really great one to evaluate. So let's just pull Ripple up, and we'll get to that here momentarily. All right, so if we can see Bitcoin now, I do have a couple of extra indicators as well, so you guys probably saw that. Some of our indicators are optional, and we'll get to some of those as well. But what I'm going to do here is just go to our properties, and we're just going to apply this setup to everything and just keep it nice and simple, because I want you guys to see with the power of the predictive indicators just how simple this can really be. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. Keep a simple strategy that you can define your rules around, and you can trade and be disciplined. It's the same thing like trading a stock, okay? So if you see Dogecoin here, we have that crossover again, 929. So this didn't happen quite as early, right? We see that the full crossover comes on 929 on Doge, and we can see that we do have also our, let's just go through and double check ourselves, right? Do it with me so you can see we've got a bullish crossover to the upside. We've got our bullish neural index. We've got the predictive differences coming up. And on that day, we also had a bullish predictive trading candle. You can take my word on that. There's also ways to go back and look at it. But those 4 points of confirmation is ultimately what we're looking for to say, you know what? This is worth my time and effort to go look a little deeper, a little further, right? So let's also take into account the fact that October tends to be a really bullish season for cryptocurrencies. Does anybody do any type of seasonal analysis at all? Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull that up as well. Tell me in the comment section. Let me just save this as my default again. VantagePoint's very easy to customize here, and it does come with, of course, months of training as well. Litecoin, there we go. All right, I almost pulled up the stock. That probably would be fun to evaluate as well, but let's take a look at Litecoin also. Thanks, Patrick. Okay, perfect. Okay, so for those of you who are new to cryptocurrencies, as we go through our analysis, let me know, like, what is holding you back from trading cryptocurrencies? I'd love to just kind of get your thoughts in the comment section. Do you just not know where to start? Is it setting up the new exchange? I mean, what is kind of your biggest challenge to starting trading the cryptocurrencies? Let me know in the comments section. So let's walk through this, our continuation now on Doge. We see that we had our crossover point here with potential bullish expectation confirmed by our predictive indicators. So let's also, I said that there were some additional indicators. Now, again, with cryptocurrencies becoming more mainstream and the institutional investor starting to get involved as well, that makes the institutional movement really important. So you could actually use an accumulation distribution. We have a Larry Williams electronic market accumulation and distribution indicator. that you can add to that is optional here. And I'm just going to refresh it on my chart. Apparently, I've just got to give it a good old refresh before adding it on. That happens sometimes, right? When you're live, it doesn't want to. There we go. All right. So for this, we want to look at kind of the overall trend as well. And we can see when institutions start to move into the asset, the institutions are tracked by this blue line that you see on the screen. So larger moves, bigger waves in this market are going to be caught by moving along with those institutions. So keep that in mind as we go through the analysis. We can look at institutional flow or accumulation, distribution on several different assets here with you guys today also. But this has been something that's really been a turning point for cryptocurrencies as well, is institutional investors starting to involve themselves in the crypto markets as well. So we can see here that we're really looking for higher lows, and we can see higher lows here. And in case you're not aware, this black line is an average line. So the institutional investing is above average here. And so with our higher lows, we can see institutional investing accumulating within that market expectation. So if you want to be able to follow those institutions, Larry Williams, he is someone that VantagePoint works very closely with as well. Some of you may already know who Larry Williams is. So okay, so just the ambiguity. I gotcha. Not really knowing what it is. Okay, there are some, kind of tricky stories out there when it comes to some of the altcoins. So make sure that it is a coin that, is trusted, of course. And anything that you see here in VantagePoint, we're going to make sure that we have the data and the backing and the forecast for as well. So that's one way that can give you confidence too, to even get yourself involved in the cryptocurrency trading. But if you want to avoid some of that heartache and kind of investing in just one coin, kind of the old scam mentality, I guess, if that's what you want to call it, right? Only because that's what I see in some of the chats here, then ETFs are a great way to do that as well. So I'll just jump on over. Who is familiar with some of the cryptocurrency ETFs? Now, if you're a seasoned pro on cryptocurrency, you should be aware of those. If you're not, well, now you are, so you're welcome. But I'm sure most of you are, if not. But it seems like for those of you who are newer, it might just be not quite sure how they move or, knowledge. So you can trade ETFs. ETFs are equities, right? So you can trade them just like an individual stock, but instead of trading one entity, one cryptocurrency, you're actually trading a basket, right? Or and not kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket, I guess would probably be the best way to describe that. So with an ETF, here you can see we've got CoinShares Bitcoin ETF. So this is an ETF that's going to follow Bitcoin, but it can be traded within your traditional market account. Okay, so whichever one you have, this, if you could trade ETFs, you can trade cryptocurrencies. So this is a new kind of evolution in the markets here, especially recently. They've just become a little bit more mainstream with a lot more acceptance and things, and there's regulations that go behind that, of course. But we won't get into those nitty-gritty details right now. But what you need to know is that they're tradable, and even better, you can, because they're an ETF, a lot of times you can trade them within your 401k. So lots of different ways to trade cryptocurrencies, even if you're not comfortable setting up that cryptocurrency exchange or you're just not quite sure where to start. ETFs could be a great starting point for you. Okay, so if you can see, we're going to read the indicators the same exact way. It becomes very easy. It's kind of rinse and repeat at this point. And so if you notice, what we have is our crossover, right? We see our crossover. We see our bullish neural index. We see all three of our predictive differences coming up. Check them 1, 2, 3. Final check on our predictive trade candle here. And then you've got a really nice potential setup for an upcoming expected bullish trend. So this is a great way for you to be able to see what's expected to happen ahead of time rather than just trying to guess what the next trend is going to be, right? Now, you could also add additional levels of analysis here. Again, we're keeping it very simple with our crossovers, and that's the first step. But if you really want to, add additional analysis like supply and demand, support and resistance, that's where you could even add in those verified support and resistance zones as well. So I'm just going to add on our verified support and resistance zones. Now remember, green for bullish, red for bearish. So when you see support and resistance, you'll notice that this area shaded in green down here is really providing a lot of support for price. So what this is doing, if you notice the action on price action, this is actually providing this trampoline or this bounce effect off of this support level. So if you see price come down and touch our lower support level, again, with the bullish cross coming on up, predictive differences are up here. I know, hello, I'm probably covering that area, but you can see a nice bounce off of that support level, right? So what happens the next time we come down and hit that support level? We have, again, a nice bounce off of that support level. And again, the third time here, that bounce off of the support level. Now, of course, you do want to confirm with the predictive indicators, and that's where we can see even right here the difference between just a little bit of a blip and a full-blown breakout. So understanding how to manage those positions, not only where to enter, but where to go from there, is a key component that VantagePoint can help you be more proactive. So during slight pullbacks and things of that nature in the market, like what we see happen right here, your emotions are kept at bay, right? We're able to set the emotions aside and trade based on the discipline. And in working with thousands of traders, trust me, I know how hard that is sometimes. So who has ever taken an emotional trade, right? If you're a trader, I'm expecting you to say yes in this chat, right? The question is, do you want to remove some of the emotion so you can trade more strategically? And in order to do that, you should really be proactive in your approach. What better way to do that than use artificial intelligence, right? So this is, again, one of those ETFs as well. So just checking the chat here. Oh yeah, Joe, absolutely. I'm sorry. I didn't even see that comment until I was just going back through. This is the importance of going back through. So Joe wanted to see the professional sentiment on this chart on Doge. So we'll absolutely go ahead and add that on. So I'm just going to come in and add our professional sentiment. So for those of you who are not familiar with professional sentiment tracks the movement of professional traders. So it tracks their sentiment based on what they're trading. And so with professional sentiment, understand that this is an inverse indicator. So I would call this kind of the opposite indicator, if you will. So it's going to go in the opposite direction of the expected trend. But if you know that, well, it's easy to read the signals. So you can see we have PSI coming down from its upper threshold. That would be a potentially bullish signal confirming our 4 points of confirmation. So now we have institutions moving in, professionals also shifting their sentiment in a more bullish move, and then also our 4 points of confirmation. So you've got a lot of expectation there for that upcoming trend. And again, that's where you can really start to understand the difference between that short-term blip versus that larger breakout. And oftentimes those larger breakouts occur when we have institutional backing. Why? They move a lot of money in the markets, right? So if they're putting their weight behind that position, then why not ride that wave, right? So does anybody do any sort of institutional analysis in their current strategy now? Let me know that in the chat, please. And Joe, hopefully that was helpful for you. All right, so let's also, I'm gonna come back to Bitcoin. I'm gonna circle back for a second because I mentioned something about seasonality. And we said, October is typically a pretty kind of hot time for the cryptocurrencies. And so if you actually take your other Larry Williams indicator, I know I'm focusing on that little handsome guy right down there, but you can see that seasonally speaking, the cryptocurrencies actually do follow a seasonal pattern. And so I'm just gonna kind of highlight right here where we saw a dip coming back down, right, from seasonal expectation. Now, again, not the end all be all, because seasonality is the directional movement. When is that directional movement expected to take place? Your timing indicators in VantagePoint will identify that. And when they pair up, when they move in sync, it's incredibly valuable to your confidence level and hopefully your trade account, right? So if you see, we have that crossover along with confirmed seasonality. Now, your chart can push slightly out a little bit to see that upcoming expected bullishness, or you could also just jump this chart back because seasonality is based on the seasonal moves within a trend. So it's actually like the average daily yield plotted on the chart throughout the course of the year. So we can look back to see what happened last October during this time of the year, and we can see we just had a huge rally, and that seasonality is confirming that expectation as well. If you want to jump back 2 years to assess even further back, you can again see that now looking back 2 years, we again see that rally coming up in October. And so seasonally speaking, October, Uptober, however you want to call it, right? But we know now what the expectation is. Now it's having the confidence to see how high will this go? Do we have the confidence of the continuation? And how do we protect those profits along the way? And that's where, again, you know, the position management piece, having those predictive indicators can really help you. But this type of analysis, you know, incredibly valuable when we talk about identifying the current trend and then understanding where to take the opportunity. So just going to jump back into our 3-month view, but that's a really nice look at cryptocurrency and some of those nice moves that you can capture from a swing trade standpoint as well. So jumping on in a little closer. All right, so let's go to some user requests or some attendee requests. So we had Ripple, XRP. Now, XRP is another cryptocurrency for those of you who are not aware, aka Ripple. Now, we've had a little bit of a ripple here within the current trend, and you can see that we actually have that very similar crossover happening along the same lines. So here's, again, the beautiful thing about this is now that you know that these markets are all interconnected, seeing these similar trends take place really makes so much more sense. But you didn't have to do all that work. We're letting the software do it for you. So we can see with Ripple, again, you know, cryptocurrency seeing that crossover. You guys take a look and tell me on this expectation on 9/29, based on our points of confirmation, we've got that bullish crossover, bullish neural index, and bullish predictive differences. We would have also had that bullish predictive trade candle as well. And we can see really nice confidence at that point of that bullish expectation. Now, here's another key point. Now that I have support and resistance on the screen, let's take a look to see, did we have anything standing in the way of this trend? And this is where position management really is going to come into play. So with support, we've already discussed, support is going to act as that trampoline for price. Like, look at what happened so many times off of this support level, right? So we're looking at a fairly strong support level at this point. You could use your crosshairs again. I'll just kind of put them right here. So we've got a support level right around 271. So at this support, we can see price starting to renew bullish strength. We get that full crossover for a bullish expectation. Who doesn't want a good bounce off of support, right? That's one of those key elements within a trade strategy is, where are we at in relation to support and resistance? Because support is where buyers reside. So if we're sitting down here with buyers, right, the expectation is bullish. Now, we have to assess how much room are the sellers leaving for this to run. And so this expectation, the distance between our support and resistance, can act as our kind of expected runway, if you will. So if you notice, what we see with this crossover is then the expectation or even potential profit target here as well. And this is incredibly important in that swing style of trading. Now, from a management standpoint, if we can break through that resistance, if we have enough momentum, right, which is another kind of key piece of the strategy, momentum, guys, predictive differences, as well as maybe some other shorter term momentum indicators like RSI or stochastics, even a MACD as well, to help you confirm that break of the break of resistance with momentum, then that would be confirmation of that potential continued expectation, that continued bullish trend. All right. So when we see a nice runway like that, it's, no obstacle standing in our way. It's a little less risk. And of course, there's always a risk in trading, right? There's no perfect trading system, no 100%. But if you can trade with confidence and trade with a system that helps you remain disciplined and remove the emotion, you set yourself up in a really good position to have, much more potential success. So as we see, that's kind of Ripple. Did we have any specific questions on Ripple? I think it was Michael who had asked that question. So tell me there. You want to see volatility on Ripple. All right, let's throw that in here. So you could also look at things like Bollinger Bands or even your Keltner channels. Anybody familiar with a volatility indicator like Bollinger Bands or Keltner channels? Who uses volatility in their trade strategy? Let me know that, because we have a couple here in the VantagePoint software. Again, some of these are optional that you can choose to add on, but just a quick overview on Bollinger Bands. You can kind of use you can use Bollinger Bands as an expectation of expected rapid movement, where there's more volatility coming in. Now, volatility is not always a bad thing, okay? Volatility just means that the price fluctuation is moving rapidly. Well, as long as you're on the right side of that volatility, as long as you can predict the direction, then you can proactively use that volatility to work in your favor. And so that's what Bollinger Bands help you to do. So here we see a Bollinger Band starting to expand. So think of the Bollinger Bands like a spring. So when you compress, when price compresses on itself, that's the Bollinger Bands squeezing together. All right. And then what happens when you have all that stored energy in a compressed spring? It bounces off, right? And so when we see that rapid expansion, that's when we would expect to see that increase in volatility. And again, if you're on the right side, it can lead to some substantial movement within that market. So we can see that our upper band is springed out, our lower band is starting to as well. So this is the beginning of that pop in volatility here and that expected bullish volatility, because we are seeing our directional indicators already bullish in this case. So if you had entered in maybe a little bit earlier, just some different ideas and different ways to look at the charts here. If you like to enter into a trend earlier, you know that that might be a little riskier. That's okay. Maybe you take a smaller position here, right? But then once you see that added volatility increasing in your favor, then maybe you add to that position. That way you can sort of scale into and scale out of the position as well on the exit. So just, different things that you can do here in VantagePoint to help you navigate through the risk, navigate through the position, and minimize losses, maximize gains. That's the goal, right? Especially in swing trading. Where can we see volume? Sure, Dim, absolutely. So volume, we could find it in our drop down, right? But you can also just type it in the indicators up top. click that quick little button and it will add it to our chart. I just need to turn this on and give it a refresh. Guys, you don't have to do this each time. We can, help you guys set up your charts to how you want to see it as well, but I'll back this out. You can see volume down here. So right now, of course, we have volume at about 3.642 million. And we've got primarily bullish volume happening here. In fact, when we had our 4 points of confirmation, we also had 3 days of bullish volume, another confirming signal of that bullish expectation. So as we start to layer on these indicators, you can see that your confidence level is just stacking itself up. So, you of course want to stack the odds in your favor when you trade. And so using the predictive data here, including things like volume as well. Now this volume is not predictive, okay? So anything you see a little blue dot on here in VantagePoint, that's going to be powered by the artificial intelligence. So we have neural networks running behind the scenes to evaluate those markets that are pushing, pulling, and driving. I love to just open up our market details so you guys can see that. Here's Ripple in the center. This is our focus market for Ripple, of course. And now you can see the additional cryptocurrencies that impact Ripple, including Dogecoin. You've also got the Euro USD in there, Litecoin. You've got the Qs as well. You can see those down there. You've got other Forex pairs, and of course, individual US stocks. Who knew Carnival Corp was going to be in here, right? But they are. So this is a really, really important framework for the artificial intelligence that's working behind the scenes to give you these incredibly powerful forecasts. So anything that you see with that blue little dot, and yes, you can see I'm hovering over those Bollinger Bands. They are predictive as well. All right, so let's clear off that. I'm going to jump on over to Litecoin and let's evaluate here. So you guys can see now kind of what is happening with the markets. We looked at that original kind of parent market or overarching theme of cryptocurrencies, looking at the big players. And this is the real importance of a top-down approach, all right? Because you need to, oftentimes the hardest part for traders is knowing where to start even for the day, right? So kind of think of it as a funnel. You want to start big and work your way down to the individual asset. So with that, kind of looking at Bitcoin was our first step to understand, okay, are the major markets in this area moving significantly? And we knew that Bitcoin was, and because we had that signal last week of that expectation, that bounce off of support. And then we're moving on down into other like assets that might follow that type of trend. So again, Litecoin being one of those. So let's jump on in here. We can see, again, crossover, bullish neural index, bullish predictive differences, and then our bullish predictive trade candle as well. So oh, Patrick, you were probably really familiar what I was talking about then. So that's great. Thank you for that. But we could also add on that volume. And you know what? I'm just going to come back to Ripple. All right. And let's right click. I'm just going to save as the default here just to get this quickly transferred over so we don't have to add so many indicators each time. We'll just reload as the default. We'll let the software work for us. And there we go. Now we've got Bollinger Bands and our volume on here as well. So with this, we can see we did have the start of a bullish trend on 9/28. We already confirmed that together. So let's take a look to see if we have rising bullish volume. In fact, we do. We have 3 days of rising bullish volume right here. And then did we bounce off of support? We did, right? So we're just kind of building a case for the movement here. How you trade it is going to be completely up to you, right? Now, if you see this confidence level right here as we're bouncing off of support, bullish volume, points of confirmation moving on in here, then what happens? If you decided to enter into this bullish expectation, right, then we see that the Bollinger Bands pinch in on each other, right? So that's that compression of price. And then what happens? They start to rapidly expand out. And this would be kind of that bigger or larger pop in movement that we would expect for some of those breakout trends. All right. And we've seen that happen over the last couple of days, especially with that movement today. Keep in mind that VantagePoint users, if you're just seeing this for the first time, you actually have access to all of this information that we're looking at right now at 6:30 p.m. the night before. So last night you could have planned and prepared for the market expectation today. So let's, again, Bollinger Bands expanding, pop in rapid volatility, bullish expectation. Did we have anything standing in our way? We've got resistance up here, so we've got some room to run, and we've got a nice potential bullish expectation or potential setup there for you. No emotion, just confidence and plenty of opportunity. So any other cryptocurrencies you guys want to take a look at today? While you type in the chat, just below that is the like and subscribe button. Go ahead and hit that for me as well. Because we do try to provide as much, training here within VantagePoint. We do strive to be a resource not only to our VantagePoint family members, but also to all of those other traders out there as well. So if you can hit that like and subscribe, that would be awesome. So we can just continue to bring you more educational content here within the markets. All right, Martha Solana, let's take a look. Thank you for that. And you guys, if you want to type in some other ones, we've got about little over 10 minutes left. So we could probably, rock and roll through a couple more ticker symbols if you want to throw those in there as well. What about a stock that relates to crypto? You know what, Michael? That's funny you actually say that. I've got Coinbase pulled up already, so we could look at that, but if you want to look at BTBT, we can certainly do that as well. Thank you. Absolutely. Let's get that rolling here. Nice. Okay, let's also take a look at, all right, ADA, FNMA. All right, I am just pulling some of these up here, guys. Give me 1 second. I'm going to simplify this here for just a moment. Okay, there we go. Let's see. ADA. I'm hoping, Sharon, that was that you wanted Cardano and not a stock. FNMA. It doesn't look like we forecast for that one. Keep in mind that anything that we forecast for on here is going to be backed by those predictive indicators, that predictive analysis. So if we don't have enough data, or if we can't forecast for it incredibly accurately, then we will, run it back through the neural networks and just improve in those forecasts. We have a minimum accuracy rating that we want to uphold because we want you to trust the charts when you look at them on VantagePoint. So that accuracy rating is really integral to the VantagePoint software and making sure that our family members trust the software. Okay, APLD, sure. Let's take a look. All right, let's see. Who had asked for the VIX? Someone asked for the VIX. David. All right, David, thank you. All right, so we'll definitely take a look at those. So let's go with BTBT, right? So if we take a look, we do have our crossover that happened on BTBT back here, right? We did have a little bit of a drop, but our support held nice and strong. Again, this is position management. We did have, again, on 9/29, we had our crossovers coming up. We did have bullish volume. We had our predictive differences trending up and a bullish neural index as well. Thanks, Sharon. I appreciate the confirmation for sure. Just want to make sure I always get the right ticker symbols pulled up for you guys. So with our confirmation here, do we have a potential continuation, or was this just going to be kind of that blip? Well, there's a way to better navigate through this as well, because as I mentioned, you could also look at a longer term expectation. So if you notice, we actually saw our first initial crossover in this overall trend. I want you guys to understand that knowing what type of trend the current market is in is vital to understanding what types of opportunities to look for. I can't say that enough, because something that's already in a bullish trend is going to behave a little differently than something that might just be reversing into a new type of trend. And so if you notice here, we've got a bearish market that reverses and a bounce off of support that pulls on into a longer term expectation of bullishness. So this is what we would call a reversal, or if you want to call it finding a bottom. You know, there's lots of different trading terminologies to identify this type of, reversal scenario. So here the question is, do we have on 9-9, do we have that confirmation of bullish expectation? And we do. 4 points of confirmation check out just fine, right? Nice and simple, nice and easy. So then navigating the trend through is just to see, okay, well, is our bullish trend continuing to the upside, right? And we can see that it is. So we did create a new resistance here. We had some trouble breaking through that old resistance. So I'm terrible at drawing straight lines on the screen, guys. That's why I use the crosshairs as much as I do. So if you notice, this previous resistance that was established on 8/13, this is why things like support and resistance are so important, because they help identify these crucial or critical pivot points within the trend. And so this resistance was established back in August. We can see that already. By the time we get to current day, we can see that price is having a really hard time breaking through this resistance. In fact, we failed to break the resistance up until current day. We're really just coming back for a retest of this resistance level here, right? So when you see that bounce off of support in an already bullish trend, you now have a potential profit target at resistance, right? Now, management, if we break through that resistance level and we have good confirmation of that continued bullishness, that's where that momentum and volume is going to give you the additional guidance to whether or not we're likely to break through that resistance, or should you take profits at that point. So that's a critical position management point at that pivot with support and resistance. So at this, key level, I call them key levels because there's a lot of them in trading, right? So resistance is a key level. Do you take profits, or do you potentially look for the breakout, right? Using your predictive indicators to help guide you through and lead the way, so you're not maybe exiting out early and leaving a lot of profits on the table. You could also move your stop up at this point because it is a little higher risk anytime we're up against resistance. So moving the stops up to help protect against some of that increased risk. And then if we break through, then maybe you add to that position for a potential breakout, right? So there's lots of different ways to manage your position through those obstacles for price and through those various key levels. All right. I think that pretty much so brings us through BTBT. Any other questions on that one? All right, so you could also add, again, we can come down through, we could look at your electronic market accumulation and add that to the chart. You could look at your seasonality as well. Let's just see if this is gonna pull up for me. If not, we'll just move on to our next chart here. There it is. So let's take a look at institutional movement here. All right, well, the blue line is our institutions, guys. Is that an accumulation of this asset by the major institutions, or is that a distribution? All right, this is a clear accumulation because this line is moving up. We're seeing higher lows, right? Higher lows is that surefire sign to that bullish expectation. So even if we were to connect those dots here, we can see higher lows. In fact, this cross above the price action here is a key signal that says, all right, institutions are moving in pretty heavily here. So we're expecting to see a larger move happening right here on 9/9. Why? Because the institutions are backing that movement. And we actually already had that accumulation starting way back at the end of July. So this precursor, this setup, if you will, is setting up the market conditions for a potentially bullish movement. And then once those market conditions are already set and we have our other factors in alignment here, that's when you start to see these really fantastic breakouts that happen for a longer term swing or even just a longer term position overall, looking for that more rapid movement in the markets. So perfect. All right, let's jump on over to Cardano for Sharon. So here we go. I feel like we've evaluated this chart so many times only because most of the cryptocurrencies are moving there. So, you know, if you're not seeing the correlation here, you know, we'll take a look at a couple others coming on down the line. But if you notice what's happening here on 9/28, do we have that bounce off of support, right? And this is, again, I will repeat myself because I think it's this important. Make sure you understand what the larger markets are doing. So that way, when you come down and you take a step down to that individual market level where we're looking at some of the altcoins and some of the individual stocks, you know what that market movement is. So that way you can ride the trend, you can ride that wave with the rest versus trying to fight against the current. Trade with the market, not against it. There are, you know, counter trend trades, of course, but it's going to be a lot more work for a lot less gain. So if you understand what the current market movement is, the current trend is, then you can find plenty of opportunities to ride along with it. So again, this is just another great example of that. Here's Cardano ADA. We can see we have that crossover on 9/28, bullish confirmation on the rest of our indicators moving on down through. You can see at this point, we just kind of check. This is how easy it is once you start to understand how these indicators work together and you trust their predictive data as well. Our current trend is bullish. It has never crossed over bearish, even through a bit of a down day. Is this, you know, initial movement just a blip, or are we expecting a breakout? And your current trend says, don't be scared by a down day, right? Don't get emotional. Follow your trade plan. And if that trend is still green, you can have confidence to manage that trend right on through. And we can see we still have higher lows as we're starting to come up and average those out. So again, bullish expectation, bullish predictive trading candle as well. Now this is something I want to point out because I haven't really kind of taken a deep dive on this indicator just yet, but you can see this predictive trade candle is incredibly powerful. It gives you the expected range for that day. So if you're a very short-term trader, maybe you even like to day trade, this predictive trade candle can really help you, especially better placing your entries and potentially even exits again if you are that short term. Because if you can enter in towards somewhere the bottom of this predictive trade candle and ride that all the way up, right? You've got a much larger expectation to the upside than risk to the downside. And so this predictive trade candle, you'll notice if you see right over here, here's your P high, that's predicted high, your P midpoint, that's going to be the midpoint of the candle, just divided right in half for you guys. And then the predicted low as well. That's the bottom of that trade candle. So again, another critical component of the 4 points of confirmation, but also helps you to better strategize around your entries and even stops as well. So great indicator, in VantagePoint. So many great predictive indicators here in the software that can really help guide you through whether you are trading cryptocurrencies or maybe you want to get into that area of the market and want to start with the ETFs or maybe some of those stocks that follow along with the cryptocurrencies. We can see that October is expected to be a fairly bullish market for cryptocurrencies, and understanding and being able to guide yourself through those scenarios so you don't get scared on every little blip on the chart, right? Keeping those emotions at bay, being able to trade with confidence is a key component to any good trade strategy. So I appreciate your guys' feedback in today's session. Keep those ticker symbols rolling for our next one, and looking forward to it. We'll see you guys on our next live session. Have a great day.